I want to welcome Christian Ray Flores to Mental Stillness Podcast. And so, been really excited to have you on here for a lot of reasons we'll get into. But let's just start with giving us a little bit of a cliff notes of who you are, Christian.
Well, thanks for having me. And definitely, I was looking forward to this as well. I am eclectic. That's probably the one word that describes me quite a bit. Confusing, maybe on the sort of a on some level. But basically, I do entrepreneurship. I do media. I do coaching in philanthropy. Those are sort of some of the stuff that I'm living and breathing every day. And I think the backstory that explains why I'm so professionally ADHD is that I sort of had this eclectic life, right? I grew up, I was born in Moscow. My mom's Russian, my dad's Chilean. That's already eclectic and strange. But we moved to Chile, then Germany, then Africa. This is all by age 7, and a lot of it was accompanied by, a military coup in Chile. We were refugees, and we saw just a lot of beauty and a lot of destruction, a lot of human cruelty, all sort of in one sort of very short period of time. And eventually I made it back to Russia with my mom after my parents got divorced. And that was another big tragedy in our lives. And I experienced sort of life in the Soviet Union, and I saw the whole thing implode, right? So that's sort of that is literally all of that between 0 and 20, I think that at least gives you this context, this backdrop of the several interests that I have and abilities also, and some obstacles that I've overcome.
You've really had your hand in a lot of different spaces and
Yeah.
in remote places, and also very public on stage. Before we get into some of those other spaces, like I really want to figure out what really resilience looked like and means to you. And a definition, just a working definition, because there's a lot of different theories on resilience.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but I, in preparation for this and kind of how I frame this up is I really adhere to what I'm about to read here. So resilience is the ability to adapt to and overcome difficult situation.
Mm-hmm.
It's a skill that's developed over time.
Yeah.
And so, it's not that you weren't born with the trait of resilience. You may had some genetic markers that made it easier or harder for you, but it's a learned
It's a learned
kind of
skill.
ongoing
Yeah.
skill. And I think that's the word skill. So help me understand, help my listeners understand, like, let's talk resilience. So what are some moments, experiences that you went through that were pretty transformative, that helped you grow that skill of resilience?
Well, I was just sort of thrust into the drama of the human condition so very early, right? I mean, I saw my dad in a concentration camp, being thrown in a concentration camp. I didn't know if I was going to make it out alive. They were killing, torturing a bunch of people. This is in the 70s in Chile. My first childhood memory was standing outside a concentration camp, holding my mom's hand, and she's trying to pass a little paper bag, I think it was, of food, through a guard, saying, "Hey, can you find my husband?" Which I think they just ate the food apparently, because he doesn't remember receiving anything. But it was, I think it's my first childhood memory because it was accompanied by an emotion, probably fear, disoriented sort of state of being, and sort of seeing so much human violence happening at such an early age. And I basically sort of grew up having this front row seat. You can study history, or you can be present for history. And I was just very present for history in literally 4 continents, um, and I think that really left a mark. And to your question, I think resilience is built through experiencing some major obstacle or trauma, choosing to lean into it, and seeing you can actually overcome. So then the next moment, or it could be a very different type of obstacle, but you have sort of this embedded muscle, right? You have a little bit of muscle that you go, you know what, I've done this before, I can do it again. And it sort of builds more muscle upon more muscle upon more muscle. And I like that's basically the best way I have to describe it. And as a matter of fact, I think resilience is just, it's not even your full potential as a human being. Anti-fragility is the full potential as a human being. And the difference between resilience is you sort of maintain and not shrink and not cave because of an event. And anti-fragility is actually become better at something because of an event, right? Not in spite of an event, but because of an event. And I think those two things are very profoundly human. They're available, readily available to all of us. And as you said, it can be learned. And it's one of the most underutilized superpowers that every human actually has potentially, but we can totally learn them.
You experience something here that may feel completely different from a new experience, but that new experience, you grew in your resilience and you
Hmm.
kind of bounced back quicker. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, exactly.
there's a in the psychology space, it's self-efficacy. It's like my
Mm-hmm.
belief in the capacity
Mm-hmm.
that I may not know the answer to the next thing that comes my way, but I'm going to be able to figure out where
Yeah,
to go or what to do. It's
yeah,
like
yeah,
that
yeah.
belief in self, and
Hmm.
that grows over time too. Even whenever and probably especially when we made some wrong decisions in our past. I like what J.K. Rowling, for any Harry Potter fans, and I might be paraphrasing this some, but she said for me, rock bottom became the solid foundation for me to rebuild my life.
Yeah.
What a mental shift. Where in your story or in your journey did you start to recognize those kind of painful points as this is actually going to inform me in positive ways moving forward with who I want to be, what I want to do?
I think I've had a few of them. I think the one that I remember that is very defined and had almost like these outsized um, results is, I was 21 years old and I graduated from university with a master's kind of early. I think I was the youngest in the class, right, to graduate with that master's degree in economics. And one more time, because I've already been in military coup in Chile, civil war in Mozambique in Africa. Then we went back to the Soviet Union. My parents got divorced. That was a major tragedy. So I was sort of in this place that I felt incredibly restrictive, suffocating, um, because of the top-down communist state sort of situation. And I go and there's zero upward mobility. There's no entrepreneurship is actually illegal, right, to a large degree. And then the whole thing comes crashing down. It collapses the year that I graduate. And in that moment, I believe, and it was not a moment in time, but it was a short period of time where I realized, okay, so this is like the sky's falling, and people have no idea how to exist in this new reality of free market. The Iron Curtain is down. The Cold War is over. There's chaos, right? And there's opportunities everywhere, right? And I, as a, I instead of going into banking and finance and trade, which most of my friends were going because it offered more certainty to them, right? That's what they studied for. I went into music, which was a very uncertain endeavor. But to me, it was a calculated risk because I knew that I've grown up all over the world. I speak four different languages. I was very musical. I developed my craft when I was still in college, in parallel, as my hobby. And I thought, okay, I have these pieces that I can put together. I think they have a competitive edge, actually. And it's all because of my past, because of this eclectic international flavor. And I can create music that is Western sounding, but I also know the Russian market, so I can make it more sort of acceptable to Russian ears. And I can sing, I can dance, I can write. All of that was born in hardship and loneliness and isolation and being an outsider. And now I can package it all together and put it out there and see if people like it. And I think that was a major, major, major breakthrough. And then basically within a year, I had three labels on a bidding war trying to sign me. And that was actually another echo of the stuff that I've lived through, right? And so I had a number of hits. I went from playing small clubs only in the capital city to playing sort of larger venues and being a little bit known radio, TV, then to going basically across that whole cultural space of the ex-Soviet Union, because it's still the same TV channels, the same radio stations, the same even newspapers, right? So 15 different countries, and I had a number of big hits that were very popular with the youth. It's it's just dance music, it's R&B, pop, that kind of thing. And I wrote this song called "Our Generation," and it was very anthemy, and it was basically the chorus goes, "Our generation, we're a sign of liberation." So it was almost like this interesting mix of very danceable, very catchy, right? Like a hit designed to be a hit, but the message was sort of captured the pulse of the generation. And the reason I had the ability to capture that pulse is because I grew up in freedom all over the world, and I could recognize it in this new place, and I could sing to it, and people said, "Yes, yes, that's how we feel." So I think that's another example, right, of very specific, very niche type of suffering, perhaps obstacles, and times where I didn't feel comfortable, but it grew me in a certain way, gave me insights that were fairly unique in this new space.
It's probably because I just saw A Complete Unknown about Bob Dylan. Artists throughout history have always said
Yeah,
some very profound
yeah,
things that people could be like, "That's what I feel, but I didn't have a language for it, but now I do." So it sounds
yes.
like that was true for
That's exactly it. It's that's what my wife told me. We watched this movie together, and she goes, "Yeah, you were sort of that in a way." And I was and I wasn't, because we did have the Bob Dylans of Russia, which were just off the charts amazing, actually, and still are some incredible artists. I was more on the pop side, but I had a lean towards meaning, right? Even in my pop music, I was more of a hey, go party kind of music, right? But because of the type of life I've had, I still sort of gravitated towards non-pop, a little bit more serious stuff, and I think it worked in that particular song. And then I actually released an album after that that leaned even more, but it was not as catchy as the previous one, and the album didn't sell as much, right? So
it needed that radio hook, right?
exactly, yeah, exactly.
How did those experiences propel you into the creative space? I know you said before in college, but my guess is there
Well,
were
even
some
before that, oh yeah.
earlier signs of that. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
totally, totally. Okay, so for me, it was I felt like an outsider, basically everywhere I went, and especially in the first, I literally changed 4 countries on 3 continents by age 7. So imagine how disorienting that may be for a kid. My dad told me that when I arrived in Mozambique, I went silent for like a year. Like I wouldn't talk in public because I was confused about my belonging, and I didn't understand the language very well, and so I was just getting my bearings, right. Okay, is it Russian, is it Spanish, is it German, is it Portuguese? What is it? Where should I lean, right? And of course, as a kid, you want to fit in. So if you're essentially, because of the circumstances of your life, have become sort of this person who doesn't belong, an outsider, what you also do is you create an inner world that is richer. And I think most young people, their outer world is richer than the inner world, unless you're forced to go introspective. And that's what I had. I went into books, right? I had no television. There's no iPhones in existence. Obviously, there was no internet, and we had no television even, right? So it was this very fertile place to be able to read and exercise your mind and your imagination. And my theory is that's one of the sources, right? I would read incessantly, just devour books. That was probably one. The other one was we had a group of Chilean exiles that were all professionals imported like expats to Mozambique, because the country was just getting settled. It was literally just gotten its independence. They were just building everything from nothing, or from very little rather. So we had this community of exiles, and so we would hang out all the time. So we went to school together. We hang out every day. We had parties. We had all kinds of things. Every Sunday, even they had a party in the beach for like literally a bunch of people, because they were wanted to stay together, right? And in that community, this woman, young lady, who was very musical, she started a little children's choir, right? A Latin children's choir, and her name was Angelica, and we called her Tia Keka, right? and we would rehearse at her house, and she would give us these sort of classic Latin American folk songs. Colombia, Chile, Brazil, you name it, Argentina, sort of the best of the best of the best. And we would like, some of the kids would play, she would play. If you didn't play, you would have a maracas, and then they would give me solo pieces because I had a good voice. And I remember the first time, I clearly remember that I would go to rehearsal to Tia Keka's house. And when we sang together, like I felt I was levitating, right? I felt like I could do this forever. And those were my fondest memories, was singing with the other kids. And that sort of stayed with me, right? And I forgot it for a while, actually, all the way because of everything changed again. We had to go back to the Soviet Union, and I was kind of depressed and everything. But eventually, it came back, and I started sort of dabbling. I joined a jazz studio. I got a vocal coach. I and that sort of developed a little bit more. And then when the opportunity presented itself, all of that came together because I already had a certain level of mastery in the sort of key components that would make a successful artist.
Recently, I think it was maybe even just within the last few days, I came across your letter to your 14-year-old self.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
And I want to read an excerpt from that. That it was just very honest conversation. And I know that
Yeah.
my listeners definitely will appreciate that. And so I wanted to highlight this. And so you said, your childhood is basically over. Things are about to get rough. Mom and dad are not getting back together ever. You will not have a dad to guide and mentor you in the coming years. You may get a letter or two a year. That's it. School's going to be hard, a different language, and a more challenging school environment. You'll feel dumb a lot. You'll be the only darker skinned kid in the whole school. Your standard of living will go way down for about a decade. Your bed will be a pull out chair in the kitchen. You won't see the beach for years to come. And 9 months out of the year, the weather will be cold or overcast. In a few years, you'll see the country fall apart and tanks in the streets of Moscow. There's a lot in there. When you
Yeah.
talk about the father piece, it,
Hmm.
it makes me think of, where did the role of mentors or people coming in there, maybe for professional guidance or personal guidance, what did that look like for you?
I had a vacuum for a decade, basically. Well, I had friends. My mom was an angel. I was raised by a single mom since I was 14 years old, and she just gave me so much love and affirmation. She would just incessantly say that I'm the most talented person she knows, and like she's just the biggest fan, right? And that really helped because you feel like an ugly duckling, right? When you enter a place where there's all kinds of layers to that, right? Including looking different, right? So, like, I dated this one girl for a little bit in high school, and she later told me, "Why are you dating him?" Basically referring to, he's sort of this dark skinned guy, right? Of course, little did they know that I'll become a heartthrob idol for millions,
You
just
don't
a few years
realize how
later.
good you had it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I was the ugly duckling at the time. But I didn't have. I actually had a vacuum of, especially men. I just didn't. I had maybe glimpses here and there. I had a vocal coach that would sort of kick my butt, and he was opera. He was opera trained, and I was pop oriented. I'm like, I want to sing like Prince, and he goes, "Yeah, but you need to do scales to sing like Prince." So he was probably one glimpse of a person who would just have authority over me and make me do hard things so I can grow. But it was really few and far between, which actually hurt me tremendously when I like got a taste of success, because I just didn't have an authority figure to keep me grounded. And I ended up clinically depressed when I was, literally had my number one hit. I was clinically depressed because I'd made some decisions that were just a lot of self-induced suffering they caused. And I met this guy who was a Canadian missionary, and I was very new age. I used to be atheist, but I was sort of got into new age when I was in college, and I was, as always, very well read, so I can run circles around anyone arguing about anything. and I looked down on Christians, and this guy was a Christian, but he has this presence about him, right? This poise, this peace, this wisdom about him. And he had a family, and I didn't know how to build a family because I come from 3 generations of broken homes. And that was the first time I had somebody like that enter my life, and it changed my life forever. Right? I still call him my father in the faith. Right? We have a great relationship, and I mean, he changed the very direction of my life. And he's the reason I think that I coach now, is because if he was the one guy who didn't care that I was a superstar. He didn't care any of those things, and so, and high achievers, they are, just by definition, they end up in environments where people don't speak the truth to them, you know and they're also almost always have tremendous flaws, because tremendous flaws come with tremendous talent as well. And if you are a CEO or an athlete or a fashion designer, and you're at the top of your game, you need someone to coach you, because sort of the environment doesn't offer that to you. The environment does not give you authority over you, so you become isolated and out of touch, and your flaws stay with you, and your flaws then hurt you. So, I mean, part of the reason I coach now, and I coach specifically in high performers, but high performance is that I know I have a compassion for people like that. I feel it's a very lonely place to be.
Well, and you see so many different ways that people try to deal with that loneliness, and it sounds
Hmm.
like you had some
Yeah.
painful lessons that, that, like you said, may have, because of that vacuum,
Hmm.
you kind of had to go through it instead of possibly sidestep it if you would have had some more intentional guidance
Oh,
in those
absolutely.
years.
Absolutely.
It is interesting in with resilience, and you think of trauma. One of the things that's shown up in more and more in psychology with research is this idea of people's response to trauma oftentimes has significant spiritual change. And so
Yes.
even if it was something we experienced when we were 10 years old, 20 years later, this idea of the spiritual piece
Hmm.
can be a real key piece to getting healed, as part of that
Yeah.
journey. So it sounds
Yeah.
like that was your journey. You were searching. It seems like you were searching for a lot of years
I
as
was, yeah.
well.
When I it just clicked, at some point it really clicked, and it was a surprise to me, because I didn't expect to be any way, shape, or form aligned with Christianity. I had all kinds of negative things that I thought about it, um, and it surprised my family, surprised my fans, the press. I got a lot of bad press. But I was honestly completely and unabashedly unashamed about that. I have literally, I have several magazine covers where I literally, on the cover, I say, I'm a devout Christian now, like, and people thought it was a phase and all of that stuff. So it
You went
was,
from the front page to the back page.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I had a reputation of the opposite. That's sort of the thing, right? I was the bad boy, kind of the guy who was clubbing, and, and it was all earned reputation, unfortunately. So it all went 180, well, 180. So I was like, oh, those artists, they have phases. Of course, it's not going to stick, and of course, it stuck, right? So,
So many things you said in there too around coaches, especially coaching high performers, and as a coach as well. It's like I definitely firmly believe everybody
yeah,
needs a coach, and
yeah,
it
yeah,
sounds like you're in a position where you can coach from empathy, but then also coach for perspective. It's like when you get highly successful, it's the
yeah.
loneliest spot you can be is at the top of an organization.
That's
It's
exactly
it's
it. Yeah,
so isolating, and so you getting to speak into that space from your own journey. And like you
yeah.
said, I had a top chart while I was also depressed. It's
Hmm.
you've that's a weird reality to be in. And so
And people don't know that it's actually very prevalent. Actually, so from the outside you can't tell, but it's absolutely true of, I would say, the majority of people in top situations. It's just high. It's an extremely high risk, high stakes, high anxiety inducing place to be. So you have to develop the skills to manage that and actually flourish in those
Absolutely.
spaces.
And by nature,
Hmm.
it creates environments where more vulnerability feels way more risky. It's like,
Yes, the stakes are
it's
higher.
like I need to
Absolutely.
be very
Y-
selective with who and what I share, or
You
I'm
have a
going to
lot
give
to
it a
lose. Yeah,
30% truth because there's a lot to lose here, and I don't want to be
there's a
come
got to.
across
Yeah,
like I'm unstable or
yeah.
can't lead.
And that's why I lean into vulnerability quite a bit, as someone who I don't have a massive public persona anymore, stateside, but it is decent. Like, it's not nothing, right? But I make myself post, for example, that letter to myself, to the general public, because I think vulnerability is a muscle that you have to exercise to do well long term. And it's sort of, you read that letter and you go, okay, that's a lot, I mean, I reveal my cowardice, my weakness, all of that. I do this exercise with a letter to younger self with my clients, and it's just, it's probably one of the most powerful. It's so simple, right? But it's one of those powerful things that we do, because and I've seen it so many times that now I'm prepared for it. People go, well, whatever. I mean, what is this, like a mind trick? You know, I'm the same person, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm like, just trust me. This is how you do it. This is the mindset. Take your time, and then I want you to really write it out. Take your time, and then I want you to read it out loud to yourself, and then I want you to read it out loud to the cohort, which we have small cohorts, right? And the transformation is instant. It really is. It's it's so funny. And what I see is that you write this letter and you become so much more compassionate towards yourself, so much more forgiving. You're giving yourself so much more grace, and that applies in the present now, right? You can exercise that. You can use that. So it's wonderful.
Outside of coaching, talk a little bit about other projects or initiatives, nonprofits. Give us a little bit of an idea of your current work.
So I'm still doing some ministry work, and that I'm trying to narrow my focus a little bit so I can do more coaching specifically. I'm doing some ministry work, and I've always done and always will, actually, just because, look, if you're given an ability and you can help people spiritually, I think it's a good idea. I philanthropic the philanthropic dimension is also a big deal for me. It's such an interesting shift that I only later in my 20s, my heart softened towards the poor, although I had grown up in some of the poorest countries on the planet. Mozambique is literally at the bottoms there somewhere. Basically 74%, the latest stats are, live on under $2.50 a day. I mean, that's extreme poverty. So, but my heart softened, only became when I became spiritual. So we started doing these events in Moscow for orphans, big events, right? And we connected personally. We went to orphanages all the time, and we built relationships. And I just love those kids. It's one of my best memories in life is helping those kids. And we eventually, I did some philanthropy. When I moved to the States, my first job actually was, I was VP for Latin America for this big charity, and we did projects in 9 different countries. I had a national project that I developed for inner city youth that got a bunch of awards, and that really, I wanted to learn, how do we how do we serve the most vulnerable people. I wanted to learn sort of from the big boys, right? Because I was more of an amateur when I started. And because I got this opportunity with this job, I learned super quickly. And it was like drinking out of a fire hydrant. It was kind of overwhelming, right? But I learned a lot. And I also learned some of the things that I don't want to do in philanthropy. And I've learned that a lot of the philanthropic efforts out there are really shady. They actually perpetuate the problem a lot of the time. And I decided to just land on a very simple formula, like, don't don't give them fish, show them how to fish, right? And so we have this project in Mozambique where I grew up, because I knew a lot of context, cultural context, economic context, called the Ascend Academy. You can look it up at ascend.academy. And what we do is, the idea there is sort of showing them how to fish. What does that look like? Well, these kids, they grow up in the slums of Maputo, incomplete families most of the time, a lot of HIV/AIDS, extreme poverty, endemic poverty that sort of self perpetuates. the mindset of poverty, right? It's just everywhere. They don't know anyone who's middle class. They literally don't know anyone. They don't have access to any computers. They don't have the character traits, even how to get out of it. So they go after school to this place that's air conditioned. They don't have, of course, they don't have any air conditioning. They have a nice, clean class. They have uniforms. They get a meal, and they're around these middle class people who are also believers, who tell them about character and values, and you know their place in this world. That there's not only hope, but you have inherent value as a human being. And then you add to that, so the worldview is, the mindset is huge, right? And things like that. If you give them money, they're just not going to know what to do with it. So the mindset, the character, their place in this world, plus English language, which is very makes you very employable, plus computer literacy. And the idea is that you have sort of these just rudimentary foundational pieces that can actually get you out of poverty. With, by the time you're done with high school, you'll probably be making money one way or another. So, and that's basically the idea of the Ascend Academy.
And then let's plug your book as well.
Oh, so I I wrote this very eclectic book called "Little Book of Big Reasons to Love America," and the subtitle is "A Love Letter from an Immigrant." And basically, the genesis of it was that we moved about 20 plus years ago. We moved to the States, and I had married an American, right? And we lived overseas in Eastern Europe together, in Russia and Ukraine, and so we brought our three kids here. And I, even before we moved, I would point out to Deb, hey, what you have here is really special and unique, and this is unique, and this is unique. So I'd just be, I would be singing praises to America, all for years. And eventually she was like, you keep saying those things to me, and those are actually particularly good insights for those who, that's all they know, right? So maybe they don't value it as much, maybe they don't, advocate for these things as much as they need to. Maybe you can write this down. So I pushed it away for a while because I thought it would be interpreted as immediately political, although it was not intended as political. So I wrote this book, and it's 10 chapters, 10 Reasons to Love America. And it's basically, the way I thought about it is like, okay, if I can get somebody to read my book in like an evening, right? It's quick, but give them enough substance in there to really, just get them thinking, just get them thinking about what they have, and then pepper that in, sort of season it with some stories. That I have so many crazy stories that sort of illustrate the point and the insight. And so that's what I did. And then I added pictures from my personal archives. I added AI generated illustrations, so it's more immersive that way. And then every chapter has this QR code, so you can follow the QR code and watch a video of me telling more stories that didn't make it into the chapter. So basically, that's the general concept of the book. So it's fairly eclectic. It's sort of hard to even describe what kind of genre it is. It's not a memoir, it's not exactly commentary. It's not just historical. So
It's another creative pursuit you leaned
yeah,
into,
yeah, yeah,
which is cool.
yeah.
Was there any projects you're up to, any kind of key things you're learning lately before we wrap up?
I think my favorite project now is I am definitely leaning back into content creation, because so I have a newsletter and a YouTube channel, a podcast. All of that sort of is bundled one way or another. It's like an ecosystem, right? And the reason I'm excited about it is that you know uh, it's the best way to scale things you have to offer for people to be able to enjoy, right? And I just want to mine my own life, the work that I do with others, and then give away insights for free, in any way, shape, or form, to as many as possible. And that's basically probably the most exciting thing I'm doing now, because I sort of I know media quite well. I own a media company, so I have the muscle for it, right, and the resources to create stuff. But I just dabbled for a long time, and I should have started creating very disciplined media years ago, and I just didn't, because I was just had too much on my plate. So now I am okay. This is it. I'm going to focus on this, and I'm going to do this for a long time. And I love it because, yeah, some of the people that watch or listen to my podcast or watch YouTube or read my newsletter, most of them won't become um, my clients. And the thing is, I can't even take that many clients just because of how I built the coaching program. It's very high support, and it's costly, but it produces great results. And I just love I love offering something like that that is transformative rather than just sort of, okay, this, you know, this keeps you perpetually dependent on me, you know, one way or another. No, I really want to change somebody's trajectory, right? And to do that, you know, there's a certain way of doing it. Now, okay, so how do I, if I can't offer it to many people, how do I offer this, at least the insights, the ideas, maybe some a food for thought and some tools to as many as possible? Well, it's media. That's the most scalable thing I can do. So to me, that is sort of a cool combo where my coaching is hyper sort of premium and small, but my content, the same exact value that I invest in the people that work with me, I can give it away for free to tens of thousands of people. And I mean, what an incredible time to live that we can do that and help others.
Appreciate you taking some time to talk to my listeners and just processing some of your own story with openness. We said this offline. Just the humanizing part is
Yeah.
what
Hmm.
draws people, and everybody is craving authenticity. And I felt like you brought that today. And from the content I see you put out there, it definitely feels authentic. And so I just want to say personally, thank you for that.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you. And thank you for inviting me and having these conversations with people that are, you know, meaningful. Again, same thing, right? It's what a time we live in, that you can have meaningful, deep, long form conversations with some of the brightest people, some of the most broken people as well. You know, I think I fit both descriptions.
Check, check, same.
Check and check, yeah. But I think that, you know, and then anyone in the world can hear this conversation, and maybe, just maybe, this might shift something in their minds, right, about their life, their future, all of it.